Welcome once again for Come Alive. I'm your host, Reverend Joshua. Today and this week, we're looking at political leadership. You see, there's so much evidence from the scriptures that the people who rise to authority, rise to power, affect the nation, actually not just financially, not just economically, but also affect the nation even spiritually. For example, if you have a man in authority who does not regard God, then the nations becomes corrupt. And I want us to contrast two people, two kingdoms that we have to see in the Bible. For example, we start with David. David, he is recorded to be a man after God's own heart. Yes, he had multiple weaknesses, problems, challenges. He wasn't perfect, but his heart and his mind was devoted to God, to please and to honor God. He desired to lead his nation in using God's wisdom. And because of that, the nation of Israel was able to prosper. He was able to come in to be at peace even with many of his enemies. And because of that, David was able to establish a kingdom that reflected the image of God, that was the pride of heaven, that was the pride of the nation of Israel itself, and an envy to their neighbors. And because of that, there was prosperity, there was growth, there was peace in the nation of Israel because of who David was. One, he never relied on his own understanding. We know that because he says that he sought God in everything he wanted to do. He desired God to be in the middle of his governance. He desired God to be in the middle even when he dealt with the court affairs. And because of that, you can see from the scriptures what the nation of Israel ended up becoming. And it was because of the work of David that we talk about that nation even now, thousands of years after. We are still talking about the nation of Israel because of the establishment and the foundation that they received out of the work of David. The second person we want to look at is, and I said yesterday, the son of David and the son of Solomon. And when the kingdom was taken from him and it was divided by two, 10 tribes formed a nation under another king called Jeroboam. And God had told him to follow him. If he follows him with all his heart, he's going to establish his kingdom the same way he established David's kingdom. But this is what Jeroboam does. Jeroboam thinks that if people go back to Jerusalem and worship God, then their loyalty is not going to be to him, but it's going to be the son of Solomon, Rehoboam. And what does he do? He elevates the calf worship. He brings idolatry. He establishes idol worship and pulls the whole nation and corrupts the whole nation because the whole nation followed the sins of Jeroboam. He lifted up high places. And what does that tell you? That Jeroboam never followed God with all his heart. And because of that, the upper nation, the nation of Israel, which was now became that nation, became a most corrupt nation. You know, they were corrupt in their own ways. Violence was in that land. And more than that, because of that, they attracted enemies from kingdoms that surrounded them. There was no peace in the land. In other words, the environment of people to be able to thrive and to be able to prosper, to be able to grow, was diminished because they had a king who was not wholeheartedly given to God. Friend, I know you may say, oh, we don't need a Christian president or anything. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a man who honors God, or a woman who desires God, someone who wants to seek God, heavenly wisdom, someone who desires God to be at the center of his administration, the center of his leadership, the center of his governance. Because remember, the anointing flows from the top, goes down. If you have someone, a man or a woman who is wicked, I guarantee you the entire nation, wickedness will thrive. If you have a man who is godly, a man who is upright, a man or a woman who is desirable, let me tell you this, it happens across the nation. because it's going to affect even the people who rule and who rule after him or below him, the administration he's going to guide. We can learn many lessons from the scriptures. And I want you to think clearly. This year being an elective year, how are you going to vote? How are you praying for our nation? Are you desirous for God to be at the center of the governance of this nation? I want to tell you this. To me, that is what's going to be a guiding force in how I elect and whom I vote for. God bless you. See you tomorrow.